not a lecture of great erudition. It's simply a sharing of two small pieces of ritual from two different cultures of the African diaspora. Now, this project is part of a greater research project that will probably be with me for years to come, because that's not, this thing is moving on its own. My hand might touch. A couple of things happened. I changed the date of my sabbatical. Like those on the COS know, I change it again and again and again. But I changed it to fall of 2012. So there was a trip going to Panama, and I was able to book onto that trip. So I was able to get some work done. But I had already made arrangements to go to St. Vincent in the spring of this year. And everything, the arrangements had been made, so I ended up going there as well. And when I put this lecture together, I thought to myself, good God, why didn't you just pick one and do it? There was absolutely too much material for two, so I've had to whittle it down, because since I told you I was doing two, I like to keep my word. So here goes. I first heard about Jesus Nazareno. Let's see if I can do this. I don't do this stuff well, so help me out. Okay, there we go. There, that's it. I first heard about Jesus Nazareno from a woman named Mother Brown. She was the leader of the prayer group I belonged to in Brooklyn, and it's moving on. Okay, I belonged to in Brooklyn, called the Nazarene Prayer Family. Everyone in the group but me was Panamanian, and we all knew that come October, Mother Brown would leave and go to Panama. And she would go because she had to be part of the procession of Jesus Nazareno. She often spoke of her experience with great devotion about the saint. And each year, she would, after she moved to New York, she would leave and join the procession, walking backwards, facing the saint, and prayed to Jesus through his offices. So believing that her faith, with great faith, that her prayers would be heard and answered. So of course, going to Panama, I had to go to this place called Portobello. I went with her daughter, and who now heads the group. Mother Brown died a few years ago. And we were fortunate to meet this guy. This man who is a native of Portobello, who not only told us about Jesus Nazareno, but of the history of African slaves who were brought from Nigeria to Panama, and of the history of the area of Portobello where they settled and where the celebration of Jesus Nazareno is held. For some reason, I cannot find my notes, so I don't have his name. And he told us a whole lot more than just about this procession I'm going to talk about, because he told us about what the slaves did, and he showed us the sites where slaves were sold, the slave cemetery, all kinds of artifacts but that's not part of it. But this gentleman was very, very, very helpful to us. He gave us a version of the story of Jesus Nazareno that went something like, two fishermen found the statue in the sea and were able to bring it to shore and put it into this church, or Church of San Felipe. It didn't belong to them, so the Spaniards wanted it back, and they put it on a ship. It took 20 men, took two fishermen to get it out of the water, get it into the church. But then it took 20 soldiers to get it back on the ship. The ship sank, and after it sank, about 2 days later, here comes the statue again. Two fishermen brought it back in. So that's just the story he told. Now you're going to find similarities to his story with this little booklet on Jesus Nazareno. Is a lot of my information comes from here. Stuff that he told us, that was all he told us about Jesus Nazareno. Most of what he told us was about the slaves and how they were brought to that part of Panama, which I'll use later. But let me go on with this. Now, so there are many versions of the story, and what comes out of this book, the person who wrote it is a woman named McGee, and she says, she warns that the stories about the Black Christ, El Cristo Negro, must be taken on faith, since nothing was recorded originally, and much of the history of the early Catholic churches and their activities on the Isthmus of Panama was lost due to the poor conditions in which records were kept, and to a fire that destroyed the city of Panama during the raid by the pirate Henry Morgan. It is believed, however, that the inaugural event occurred sometime during the last half of the 17th century, probably 1658. Several versions appear in this little book, but one says that a ship leaving for Cartagena had in its cargo hold a religious article packed in a large crate. As the ship left Portobello, a terrible storm drove the vessel back into the harbor. 5 times, according to the legend, the captain tried to sail away. Back to the story. The crew, fearing for their lives, lightened the ship by casting the heavy box over the side of the ship. When fishermen from Portobello discovered the box with the image of Jesus floating in the water, they were astonished at the lack of respect shown by the sailors, and they carried the image to their church. That church, now we have the church. Okay, there's the church, and gave it a place. That's the Church of San Felipe. Another popular version tells of how parishioners at Portobello sent a request to Spain for an image of Santo Domingo to place on the altar of their church. So back to this other version. It tells that the parishioners from this church at Portobello sent a request to Spain for an image of Santo Domingo to place on the altar of their church. Coincidentally, a congregation in Taboga, an island on the Pacific coast of Panama, requested a statue of Jesus of Nazareth at the same time. So this version says that one church in Portobello asked for a statue of San Domingo, and the other church on Taboga sent for a statue of Jesus of Nazareth. The supplier in Spain, it is said, incorrectly labeled 2 boxes, with the result that Santo Domingo arrived in Taboga and Jesus of Nazareth, the Black Christ, was delivered to Portobello. Well, the church in Taboga wanted their statue, but the church in Portobello said, well, they were having trouble sending it, and so it never did get there. In any event, the church in Portobello kept the statue because they believed that the figure of the Nazarene had miraculous powers, so they weren't giving it up. As with any myth, the origin is uncertain, and it is not certain how the figure actually arrived, nor why it has remained. All that can be certain is that this piece of religious art is so much a part of the life in Portobello that El Cristo Negro is synonymous with both the town and the church. The sculpture that the fishermen had taken to the original colonial church was moved to a new building, Iglesia San Felipe, that had been under construction for over a decade when it was inaugurated in 1840. So it's important for me to say a word about the population of Portobello. Panama was a Spanish colony, but there were a number of events that impacted the shape of the community by the time we get to where this next picture I want you to see. This is a picture of a native Portobello, and I'll come back to that picture in a minute. Let me just stay with the church for a minute. First, the abandonment of a 200-year-old Merced convent in 1813. Secondly, the abolishment of slavery in 1821. Third, a fire that destroyed the only remaining hospital in Portobello. Fourth, Spain's abandonment of her colonies by the second decade of the 19th century, including the removal of all Spanish soldiers after 235 years of occupation. And the most troublesome of all, independence from Spain that threatened the community and the colonists' way of life. Many soldiers had died during their assignment from fevers and tropical diseases, and those who returned to Spain via Cuba just escaped a cholera epidemic. The remaining colonists who survived were few, so it was a hardy and primarily black population of the slaves that had been brought to Panama that continued living in Portobello. So, holding on to elements of the African culture that bespoke a love of dances and songs, the people of Portobello celebrated with congas, dance rituals that were performed at Carnival. So, that's the woman who, that picture there is not very clear because, I guess because it's all red. But this is a little booklet that comes from the conga festival that they have. And this other picture is of a child a young woman in the festival. And so that's synonymous with with Portobello as much as this Jesus Nazareno festival. Okay, so I wanted you to see that. In the meantime, as officials tried to determine what would become of Portobello, because with the Spanish gone, the roads were very bad. They were planning to build a railroad track there, but it went to Colón instead. The colonists all kind of just left because the houses were disintegrating. They were so dependent on speed. Portobello was at risk for just kind of just falling into the sea. But what kept it alive was that people kept making pilgrimage journeys to El Cristo Negro. The only means of traveling to a festival in Portobello was by boat, which meant braving the elements at sea during the stormy month of October, and was only slightly less dangerous than going through the extremely poor roads. Nevertheless, pilgrims braving the elements, pilgrims kept visiting the church in Portobello. Not a very clear picture, but it gives you just a sense of the dress, and if you know, they're all African people. By this time, the Portobello is mostly just black. First in groups of 10 and 20 and then hundreds, packed into excursion launches because it was the only way they could pay homage to the saint and beg favors at the foot of El Nazareno. The procession and festival have many of the same characteristics as religious festivals that took place during the Middle Ages in Spain. Upon entering the church, the odor of incense and candle wax penetrates the nostrils. Wooden pews have been moved to the back of the church to make room for pilgrims who wish to drop to their knees before the image of the Savior, or who stop to light a candle before the altar. Hundreds of candles in glass containers cast a warm glow on the, I have a nicer picture than you want here, on the main focus of the room, which is this statue that you see here. The Nazarene is bent forward in his struggle to support the burden of the heavy cross he carried to Golgotha. The dark wooden sculpture wears a crown of thorns. Beads of blood trickle down the furrowed brow. The hair adorning the head is human hair. The eyes, although carved and painted wood, have a lifelike, piercing expression. A slave, fixing his eyes upon this figure, could feel the agony. El Nazareno demonstrated much of the pain that was felt in being black. Como pasar la pena negra.
How to get through the pain
of being
black.
Okay. For days, even weeks before the festival, pilgrims traveled the road to Portobello from far and near. Each pilgrim, peregrino, wearing a purple garment, which is worn constantly for as little as a few days during the days of the festival, or as long as like the year. Mother Brown always made a purple garment. That's her daughter, that's the church, that's who I went with. And this garment is referred to as a toga. And it signifies that the wearer is making a manda. Okay. One more picture. There's a picture, not very clear, it's better here, but it didn't come out very clear when we took it because people were at worship and we didn't really want to intrude. But it's that kind of thing where people are, making their devotions to the saint. That's not Jesus Nazareno, but it just shows you kind of the inside of the church. The purple vestment referred to as la toga signifies that the wearer is making a manda, which can be a response to a strong personal urge to answer a divine command, a penance for wrongdoing, or simply a demonstration of faith. Also, pilgrims ask for special favors from the saint. The familiar purple toga seen on the streets of Colón or along the road to Portobello as the day of the festival approaches is obvious evidence that La Manda is in the making. And when the day of the promise has been fulfilled, at the completion of the procession at midnight, October 21st, a pilgrim casts off the vestment. So if you're going to be making, what's Manda?
That's not standard Spanish.
Okay, all right. But what it is you're making a petition. You're making a petition for something to the saint. You can start as early as you want. You can start from the time the festival ends. 1 year, you put this on and you wear that constantly for the year. Or you can start it a few days before or a few months before. However deep that petition is that you're making, You wear it, and you keep wearing it. You don't take it off until the night of the festival when everything is over. This custom accounts for a large and often soggy pile of purple that can be seen in front of the church the morning after. Togas of poor quality are destroyed, but those made of good materials are sent to other parts of Panama. It is said the poor make quilts of them. On the appointed day, hundreds of people mill about outside the church. We have a picture of the church. The disabled arrive supported by canes or crutches, and they are wheeled or carried into the church by family members. They bring with them small tokens of silver and gold to be pinned to the ornate velvet robe that has been placed upon the figure, or are hung from the fingers of the outstretched hands by means of satin ribbon. And I have to tell you, Mother Brown told us, it's not just small. People take off their big gold chains and hang it over the saint as they get ready to put it out, or as the saint passes by. And you pin your petitions to the saint, because as the procession goes, your petition goes along with it. Let's see where I am. These tokens called milagros are representative of body parts: hands, arms, feet, legs, hearts, and heads. A few are in the shape of houses. These tokens are purchased at jewelry shops. They correspond to the special needs of individuals. The expectation is that the saint will heal that which is not whole or aid a troubled household. In former times, when believers had no money to spend, its symbols were made of wood and clay. The milagros express a hope that through a kind of sympathetic magic, the supplicant will receive miraculous results, much in the way they believed that their ancestors were saved from a cholera epidemic by appealing to the saint. Pinned along with the milagros are the secular tokens, personal jewelry, as I said, athletic and even civic medals, and even lottery tickets. The latter have been pinned to the hem of the garment as a gesture of thanks, or in promise to share winnings with El Cristo Negro. Such elements of secular and religious significance are tightly woven into all aspects of the celebration. The robe to which these tokens are pinned is extremely ornate, and we took pictures of older robes that they have in glass cases. It just didn't come out well, so I couldn't show you more. But they talk about they're velvet robes, and they are heavily embroidered. The fabric is of expensive velvet, and for the October festival is red, color vino. The saint's toga is changed twice a year, for the October festival and for La Semana Santa, Holy Week, where the tradition is to dress the Nazarene in the color purple. New garments are made when funds are donated for the purpose. And there's the traditional style of the robe is constructed by a group of women who do nothing else in that town but make robes for the saint. That's all they do. They sew and they decorate the toga with lace, gold braid, jewels, and sequins. Sometimes a particular theme is chosen for the festival, and these decorations are made patterned to that theme. Beneath the outer robe are undergarments of snow-white linen, trimmed with handmade lace and tatting. The vestments have been cared for over the years and stored in the sacristy. Like I said, we saw some. The sodality, a cohesive group in charge of the church, are made up of both men and women who participate in caring for these garments and who dress the saint as well as decorate the anda. Here's the anda. That's the anda. They carry the saint on. The anda for each religious festival with candles and handmade flowers of beeswax sent from Spain. These are unique artifacts that are used only for decorating the anda of El Nazareno, and they are stored very carefully, put away very carefully. You can see them, but you can't get very close to them. A curious figure accompanies the Nazarene during the procession through the town. The smaller figure, and we didn't see that figure. I think there's a little that we couldn't see on top of the anda very well, but there was something up there. I have a feeling that's the figure. Anyway, a curious figure accompanies the Nazarene during the procession through the town. The smaller figure stands at the rear of the platform. It is light in complexion, bearded, and is dressed in modern attire, consisting of a khaki-colored suit, cloth cap, and knee boots. At the neck is a white collar with a red bow tie. Pinned upon the left breast is a medal. The figure represents Simon the Cyrene, and his presence is based on the text from Matthew 27:32. And as they came out, they found a man of Cyrene, Simon by name. Him they compelled to bear his cross. The outfit looks like something worn by a revolutionary figure of a much later time. When questioned, the unhesitating response from a caretaker was, Simon was a worker. This Simon, fully clothed in modern dress, makes perfect sense to those who wholeheartedly accept the tradition of this colorful religious festival. And the wonderment does not end inside the sanctuary. Outside the church, in the parking area, where the crowds assembled to await the emergence of the Anda, there is further evidence of extreme devotion. The bearers of the Anda, ready to take their places, are wearing ankle-length purple robes girded with cord belts. They are barefoot and completely bald, all having had their heads shaved by late afternoon on the 21st. The call to Mass is at 6 a.m. on October 21st, but the procession does not begin until 8 p.m. In the meantime, the crowd waits inside and outside the church in growing anticipation while women deliver pots of incense to the sanctuary. And to hear Mother Brown tell, if you can get it, people are praying throughout the day. Just about everybody is fasting. Now outside there are people selling food and whatever, but the people with real devotion, they are inside or close to the church, and they're not eating. Everybody is just waiting for the procession. After the procession, then they're partying. Candles are passed throughout the crowd to be lit as soon as the procession begins. At precisely 8 o'clock, El Punto, the person in charge of starting the procession strikes a hammer to la anda, which signals the bass drummer to begin. A sonorous boom, boom, boom fills the church. Bells in the tower begin to peal. The brass band starts playing the traditional march. The bearers move forward with their heavy burdens, swaying back and forth, and the crowd inside of the church wisely moves out of the way. The crowd outside applauds vigorously as La Anda emerges from the side door of the church. Here's the Anda again. Fireworks sparkle overhead as the bearers proceed across the old cobblestone path over the colonial bridge towards the former customs house. That's what that is. That's the customs house. Occasionally stopping to allow a shift of the burden. Experienced participants know to pad their shoulders or suffer a raw and sore one the next day. The march of the bearers is made in unison, and Cecilia would show us in both. And they go that the whole way. They go the whole way. That's how they march. The gait is peculiar to Latin America, as it's a quick step to lively music. So it's not very, I mean, the brass band is playing, people are, and the streets are packed, but they're moving in time, but there's this kind of nice rhythm between Latin America and Africa. They got it down pat. The bearers swing their bodies from side to side, with the result being that the long human hair of the Nazarene sways along with the movement of the platform. The eyes of the wooden statue, let me go back to the statue. Let's see if I just get a nice picture here. Oh, you can't see the eyes very well. I can. Let's go back one more. Yeah, this one, this picture. Okay. So imagine, the eyes, and Cecilia always said, my brother Cecilia always said, the eyes pierce you. It's as though they're looking right into your soul. Now, these are painted eyes, but she said, they seem to move. The hair is human hair. And the eyes of the statues catch the gleam from the sacred candles, with the result that they appear to shine as if filled with tears. It is an effect that makes the skin crawl and causes a lump to form in the throat of a devoted observer. Look, here comes the old man, shouts the father to the child riding on his shoulder. Such is the familiarity many feel towards the same. The Anda snakes through the narrow streets of Portobello until midnight. Some faithful pilgrims walk barefoot. Others kneel the whole way. Others crawl on the ground, all or part of the way. There is no obstacle, rough cobblestone, and in that area, most of the roads are cobblestone, and some are made from seashells. That's some of the information the man I talked about first told us about. Or gravel or mud. Nothing will deter the extremely devout from their particular expression of penitence. It is thought by some that it never rains during a procession. However, that is not true. But rain or not, there is no stopping the procession until midnight. At that hour, the statue is returned to its place of honor in the church, and the religious part of the festival ends. Dancing, gaming, and drinking will continue until the sun comes up, and the visitors must return to the cities and the nearby towns. Have miracles occurred? There are certainly rumors, but little substantial. Few doubt the possibility, for who can deny that faith has produced many a cure, and is, if nothing else, great comfort in times of trouble. I know Mother Brown talked a lot about going through tough times with her husband and some of her boys, and going to El Nazareno and feeling that by praying to God through the saint, her prayers were answered. Although miracles go unrecorded, rumors are enough to motivate the crowds to continue coming. Over the years, it has become the goal of young Panamanians to take part in the festival at least once in a lifetime. And many devotees will make the arduous journey to Portobello on foot, walking 40 or 50 miles. But not everyone speaks kindly of this popular event. It is recognized that some go only to prey on others. Thieves in particular have a custom of calling on El Cristo Negro, a tiny card with benediction often hangs from the neck of known perpetrators of petty crimes, in the belief that this affords them some protection of the saint. There are many other local beliefs attached to the mysteries surrounding the figure of the so-called Black Christ. Regarding the change of name from El Nazareno to El Cristo Negro, the Black, Doña Amelia Garay de Luc, a native of Portobello and descendant of the original slave, says, in Portobello, the saint is always and always will be known as El Nazareno. It was the gringos who called him El Cristo Negro. It was a group of outsiders believed to be American sailors who were given permission to be at Panama at the time of who, while viewing the procession, were so caught up in the spirit of the moment that they began to shout, "Viva El Cristo Negro!" The custom of vigorous shouting grew until, as the years went by, at least outside of Portobello, the appellation of Black Christ has become preferred by popular use. The festival has become, if not the most popular, one of the best attended religious events in Panama. And although the vigorous shouting, magical aspects, and carnival atmosphere associated with the Black Christ Festival are not likely to disappear, in truth, the essence of this holy event is expressed in a humble pilgrim's prayer. Soy testigo de Jesús, de su poder, de su amor, amen. I am a witness to the power of the Savior's love. That's it for that piece. Should I could take a few questions if you have any, and then go to the next one. Yes?
Just a question of clarification. You are referring to the saint a lot.
Yes.
And as I hear you, you're referring to the statue.
Yes.
So they're addressing the saint. Is
Yes.
that how they refer to the statue? And would that be in Spanish? El Santo or?
It's just El Cristo Negro.
Okay.
They just say El Cristo Negro. And they talk saint, but I don't know that this is a saint in the way the Roman Catholics make a saint, because it's not been, as far as I know, the Black Christ of Portobello has never been canonized. But
Well, he would. I mean, as I understand it, he's Christ.
He's
so
Christ,
he wouldn't
right.
have to be.
Okay, I don't know. Okay, so yeah, but they talk about him. They talk about the Black Christ, the Cristo Negro, as the saint.
Yeah.
Yes.
You mentioned in the beginning some similarities to Spanish traditions or
Yes.
Roman Catholic traditions.
Yes.
To what degree did you find that in the full procession and so forth?
Very, very close to medieval style procession. The way they walk, the way the devotion before, the mass before. There's a mass that takes place. The people are gathered in the church. The mass begins at 6 o'clock in the morning. They don't take the statue out until 8 o'clock at night. The whole time they're praying. And then even the way the procession goes is how they think it was done in the village.
I mean, this is a Catholic church. right?
This is a Catholic church. And Panama, most of the people in Panama, if they're not Roman Catholic still, even Mother Brown, who would say she has this kind of Baptist thing, but it's very much Roman Catholic. And, you know, in our prayer group, you know, we say the rosary in our prayer group, we do novenas, and, you know, they call it, it's Baptist, but it's Catholic. Trinidad has a lot of that same behavior. Okay, all right. So, let's go to the second one. Spiritual Baptists, aka shouters, of St. Vincent. Now, I grew up knowing spiritual Baptists or shouters as an intrinsic part of the culture of and society, as a culture and society of Trinidad. These people were the people who dressed in long clothes that denoted their rank or spiritual positions, such as leader, mother, nurse, warrior, teacher, different. That's too much to explain how to get all those things. The women all tie their hair in head wraps of varying colors to match their spiritual uniforms. Unfortunately, I don't, the ones that I'm going to show you, except for one lady, they don't have on spiritual uniforms per se. It was a Good Friday service. Especially at important rituals such as baptism or mourning. Mourning is an intense form of spiritual retreat, having some similarities to the Native American sweat lodge. It'll take me too long to explain, and some of it is not for share. I can't share with you. Folks that have not participated in it, you're not allowed to know. There's some secrecy to it. So I have, but so I can't tell you everything that goes on in it. I'm not allowed to do that. Okay? My sister and I love to go up into the hills to be part of a Baptist service. And their worship was always exciting with lots of singing and movement and shouting, and above all, catching the Spirit, which was the manifestation of the Holy Spirit on a person, during which the person with the Spirit generally did what some would call a holy dance. That's what America, using American term, we didn't call it that, we just say shouting. They shouted and spoke in tongues. Shouters were part of an underground religion practiced in Trinidad by people in the lowest classes of society. In 1917, the Prohibitive Shouters Act was passed, through which anyone who conducted a shouter ceremony, who baptized in the river or running stream or at the seaside after the manner of the shouters, I'm actually quoting from a document, a legal document here, could be arrested, beaten, and brought to trial by the police without the possibility of appeal. This law remained in effect, although from about the late 1950s, it was not really applied, and shouters frequently held services on street corners in the town or villages and were unimpeded from doing their various rituals. The underpinning of this law was the attempt by the British colonial authorities to discourage the people from practices that reeked of their African heritage. Shouters were always persons of African ancestry. Now it's not. And the groups met generally in the hills above the town, above Port-of-Spain. Somebody said to me yesterday, Port-of-Spain, Trinidad has hills. Yeah, we're called Trinidad because when Columbus came and he saw the three hills, the Trinity Hills, we've got a northern range, a central range, and a southern range. That's why we're called Trinidad. So yeah, they would go up, especially into the northern range, and hide up there because the police would arrest them. It was always interesting to me, though, that most of the shouters spoke with a Vincentian accent. They were not born Trinidadians. Many, as human beings, you know, we have a way of always trying to put down somebody. So if you were from Trinidad, born in Trinidad, and you met up somebody who was from St. Vincent or Grenada with that, they were smaller, and they were made fun of. Your accent was made fun of. I don't know why we do that as human beings, but we sure know how to divide ourselves. But anyway, I don't call the people who were born in Trinidad native Trinidadians for a reason. They're not native Trinidadians. Native Trinidadians are Amerindians. They're Caribs and Arawaks. These are people who came from Africa, brought as slaves, and later as indentured workers to Trinidad. So, but why am I talking about Trinidad when the group I'm supposed to be telling you about is from St. Vincent? Well, I'm glad you asked. It's important for me to say that because I learned something in St. Vincent that I never knew as long as all the years I knew people, shouters in Trinidad. The shouter religion began in St. Vincent. That's why the people who in Trinidad were part of that group were nearly always Vincentians. The person who gave me a lot of my information, and this picture is not at all, you can't even see the thing. His name is Leader Lorraine George. He is a shouter leader of some rank. In fact, he's an overseer of a couple of few churches. I met him years ago when I was still in the parish, when he came for a funeral of someone in my church who had died suddenly. When I went to St. Vincent, I got a lot of information from him. He said that the slaves were brought to St. Vincent. The slaves that were brought to St. Vincent originated mainly from Sierra Leone. The slaves met in an edifice they called the Praise House. And they called the river in the village of Stubbs, where most of the slaves were, and which is where I stayed. I stayed in that village, Stubbs, which is on the leeward side of the island, the Jordan River. They would gather at night with their pots, clay pots, into which they chanted and shouted to hide the sound. On moonlit nights, they would circle around a special tree, chanting, most likely in imitation of their own ritual that honored the saints of nature. The authorities were afraid of the slaves because they were all gathering as a group, and thus represented an uncontrollable mass. As much as possible, civil authority avoided whatever area the slaves were gathering in, as long as there was no trouble from them. The masters had a little bit of sense. They not only permitted the slaves to gather without interference, probably thinking it was a harmless outlet for them, but when missionaries came to convert the slave masters didn't allow them access to their slaves. In fact, Leader George said 2 Methodist preachers who tried to convert the slaves were arrested and jailed for 6 months. Many times the slaves would run away to the mountains to pray in imitation of Jesus. Jesus is going to the mountain to pray. But gradually the Methodists began to infiltrate the worship of the slaves. The slaves themselves gravitated to Methodism because of its fervor, and I hope you all know that cold Methodism is not the way it always was. We did have a little bit of heat in us at one time. Unlike slaves on other Caribbean islands, including Trinidad, where Roman Catholicism held sway, and where the slaves appropriated the names of the saints and substituted them for the names of their lesser deities, those in St. Vincent did not gravitate toward Roman Catholicism. They liked the spirituality of Methodist worship, and of course, they added their own African flavor, chanting and drumming. In 1921, however, their freedom to worship in their own way was attacked. The Anglican and Roman Catholic priests got together to ban slave services in St. Vincent. They denigrated the slaves, calling them three-quarter human, and considered them people without souls. They considered their rituals pagan, ungodly, and definitely un-Christian. The slaves, on the other hand, continued their worship of God, whom they considered both the mighty one and the unknown one. The priests saw their nature rituals as animism, but as Leader George explains it, what they were doing was honoring God for creation. Every morning they cleaned their yards to honor God. And by the way, growing up, every morning we had to clean our yard. Nobody told me what I was doing, but we had to make sure the yard was swept and clean. When a baby was born, they would bury the placenta near a tree to make the child a part of nature. That was also done in Trinidad. They honored all of nature and considered themselves simply a part of God's creation, not above anything in creation, but called to take their place in creation as a part of God's created order, and to honor and respect all of creation. Thus their worship centered on praise to God for all of God's creation. They tramped the earth in their bare feet, listening to the sound of tramp, as the sound of tramping reverberated in the earth. So this is what tramping sounds like. And if you're going to be baptized, and they put you to tramp, and they don't hear you, they'll tell you, sound the earth, let me hear the earth, I want to hear the earth. Okay. So that's what it sounds like, because they want it to reverberate in the earth, because thus you become sort of a part of the earth. Okay. And so the other reason that they tramped like that was that they wanted, through their tramping, to call forth other spirits of God that rested in nature through the earth so that they could join with them. Okay. In fact, as they tramped and experienced the resulting spiritual connection, the sound of their feet would signify their movement from the physical world into the spiritual realm. On August 1st, 1834, the slaves were emancipated. But the ban on slaves' religion as they practiced it did not come until May. Blacks continued to worship in secret. But unlike what happened in Trinidad, he didn't think that anybody was ever really arrested and put in jail. Trinidad, they did. As I said before, the Stubbs River was their River Jordan, and baptisms were done in the same way as in the early church. An aside is, the reason I started to get involved in looking at this stuff is, one, when I was doing my MDiv, and I saw a piece on baptism in the South, and I saw that the folks were dressed sort of the same way I was used to seeing Baptists dressed. I thought, interesting, I should one day look at that. And then when I did early church for my PhD, early church studies, I discovered that the practices of the early church in baptism and communion were the exact same practices followed by Baptists. And I couldn't figure out how it had, Catholics came, but how they lost it, and we kept doing exactly the same thing that they did in the early church. So that's why I kind of got involved in it. Okay, so let's talk about the regular worship service follows the order of worship of the Anglican Church, which, as you know, was the original model for the Methodist Church. In fact, many churches use hymns ancient and modern, the Anglican prayer book. Baptism is always by immersion in a river generally, or sometimes at the sea, and it is always believers' baptism. The persons to be baptized are called pilgrims. Prior to baptism, pilgrims are given a special seat, what African Americans call the mourner's bench. And you are given a candle to hold, and you are expected to be in an attitude of prayer throughout the service. Now, you're holding this candle is lit, and this wax is coming out, but you better not let them catch you trying to pick that wax off of your hand. They'll think that if the candle gets short and it goes all the way down, you're not being saved. They will let that candle wax burn your hand and then just switch off and give you another candle throughout the whole service. And the service can go for hours, so you're there. You're glad when somebody picks you up. Okay. At times, leaders in the church, mothers, which is a title, or other persons of higher spiritual rank. The church structure is very hierarchical. They can pick you up, literally make you stand up or get on your knees and work you by telling you to move your hands. So what they'll do is they'll come and they'll tell you, they call you by number. They don't you once you're on the seat for either baptism or mourning, you don't have a name. You're number 1 or number 2. Okay, so number 1, let me hear you. And okay, so let me pretend this is the candle. And you have to do this. This is what you're doing. This is my other clothes. And you are praying inside. And this is your hand that you're petitioning God to come and to be with you. You're petitioning the Spirit. Now they might put you on your knees and you stay there until they pick you up. And what their intention is to work you so that you kind of go off in the Spirit and then wash out till it begins. Okay. Right here. Now, every church has at least a leader and a mother. I showed you leaders. The leader is always male and has the highest rank and power. Even when the congregation has been started by a woman, a mother, the mother prepares her children for baptism, but only the leader and other men could go, perhaps somebody who's named a shepherd or a teacher, only then they can go into the water with the baptismal candidates. Generally, church mothers are older women who have already experienced menopause. Originally, women of childbearing age or women who are still menstruating could not go on the altar. And there are some congregations where that is still true. It's gotten much better, but in some places it's still true. Most of the time, the mother or the leader is also a pointer. A pointer is the person who prepares you to go into the mourner's room and to go on this retreat. And that's a whole, like I said before. It's just too much to explain. When they put, okay, yeah, you can. Okay, did you see on the lectern? You see an anchor? Okay, that anchor is a seal. When they put you, when you're going to be baptized and they tie your head, they actually put a band on you that has spiritual seals on it. And when you're going to mourn, you get even more bands and more seals. And an anchor is one of the seals. And the anchor is representative of a saint. So they put a lot of seals around the church, so that's one. An important aspect of developing the worship community is setting up of the worship space. Only, as Leader George explained, only as Leader George explained the purpose did I understand fully the connection of the symbols to the whole notion of being connected to creation. Even though I knew what the symbols meant. Now, how well can you see this? Is it clear? Can we take off some of the lights in front so that we can see it better? Because I want you to already see it. If you would take off some of those lights. That's better. Okay, good. Okay. Some, like I said, some of the pictures didn't come out very clear. So, let's see, where's the picture? Okay, good. That's the picture of the inside of the church that I went. Generally, it's always a small congregation. There are one or two churches that have become cathedrals, but generally it's a small congregation. And the worship space is generally a large room with, there's another picture that I show you. There's with a mourner's room that's separate from this main worship area. And there are all kinds of symbols that are representative of their connection to creation. So let me find the next picture. Good. Okay. Let me go back one and then, okay. You see it there? Mm-hmm. Right. Okay. So now that picture is in the ceiling of the church. Now, not every church is like this. This is what this one has. But they all have something like that. It's meant to represent the constellations so that during the worship, you're connected to the sky above. And then, no, go back. Yeah, okay. See this pole here? Okay, that's called a center pole. And this is usually down on the ground. Now in this church, good. Oh, not yet, you didn't see it. Here, okay, so there you can see the whole center pole. It goes all the way up into the ceiling because it's supposed to connect with sky and earth. And usually that pole is down in the ground. Now they have created a thing that the pole goes into. And there are some emblems on that, around that pole that I have. Another picture. Good. So there's a bell. You see the bell. The bell is the voice of God. You ring the bell. You know, you're sounding forth for God. The candle. There's a candle there. Usually it's in Trinidad, you know, they have big candle. But there's a candle there. That's the light of God that lights your way. Those two little round things are calabash. You know what calabash is? Calabash, for those who don't know, it's a big fruit on a tree, and you cut it in half. It's got a big bunch of coconut stuff, but you clean it out, and there's water in there. There must always be water. Sometimes it's a calabash, sometimes it's a glass of water, but there must be water because water is meant to represent the substance of life. Flowers. There are always flowers there. There's always flowers near to the center pole because it talks about the beauty of God's creation. And what happens in the beginning of the service is someone will come and take the calabash or whatever has the water, and they'll take the bell. And they will go from corner to corner to survey the room. So they'll start at the east. They'll go east, this corner, and that one, and that one, then that one, and then they'll do the doors. What they're doing is dismissing any unwanted spirits and asking the Spirit of God to come in. The candle, when a pilgrim is given a prayer candle, it is meant to represent their life. But here, this is Jesus, the light of the world. So it's used for both things. The flags. Okay. This for Vincentians is a bit of Trinidad getting into the business because originally the shouters in St. Vincent did not use flags. Flags are associated with the Orishas, and Trinidad, that is shouter and Catholic, they're shouter and Methodist, shouter and Catholic, they took the names of the saints and they made it into their saints. But the flags represent different deities. And so the blue flag would be St. Anne because she is the river saint. I don't know who their green and yellow is, but I have a feeling it's Philomen. And the fact that there are two, it means that there are two people or two leaders in this church who feel they have a connection to that saint, which for them is something new. But the flags are also meant to represent the colors of the earth. And that's why the blue is the water, and this is the tree. Now this little church was down in almost a forested area. Not because they have to hide, but I think it's kind of, it's what they were used to doing. Let's see. The people who have costumes. Now, this was a Good Friday service, so it wasn't a service that had a special ritual to it. So you're not finding folk in the garb that tells of their station. This was a time when everybody would wear white and black because it's Good Friday, and that's why almost everybody has on a black head tie. If it was like a baptism service, you wouldn't find them in this. They would be wearing the various colors that they were given. If you have not been to mourn, you would wear white. But once you've been to mourn, you get the colors of the clothes that you wear. Let's see, what else? There's one lady who has on a garb, this lady here. This old lady here, I'll show you a picture of the back of her where you'll see. She has on a white dress, let's find the picture, with a himbo. Now you can see, you see the cape on the cover of, that's part of her, she would have gotten that. You don't wear those big white cape collars unless they're given to you spiritually. So that would be a piece, a part of her garb. There's one other lady who didn't come out well. You can't see her. This woman is the mother of the church. And she doesn't have on her head tie because I took this after church was over, she was doing something. But she is in all black and she has on a leather belt. That tells her station. She's pretty high up in the hierarchy. There's a whole lot more connected with the shouter worship. But this is just a little piece. There's only one last thing I want to show you guys. Oh, well, that's me. And I want you to... when there's been singing and praising, and that is where I will stop. Okay, all right, thank you. Dr. Brooks. I don't want to identify anybody in that picture. If nobody else can identify, we're not identifying her. Yes, I am in there. That is me. Okay. Question? Yes.
Thank you, Dr. Brooks. Given the time that we have to get to Dr. Duck's retirement, I think we have time for one question.
Yeah. Oh. Yes.
I'm interested in the term tramping. Do
Yes.
you know the derivation of that?
No.
there's a Negro spiritual sung in this country called tramping. And tramping, trying to make heaven my home.
Okay, and there's a song that is sung especially when you're mourning and you're tramping. All the way to Africa land, coming to hear them grow. All the way to Africa land, longing to hear them go. Coming home, coming to hear them grow. Coming home, coming to hear them grow. And they sing that because we want them to move out and to travel out into the bigger area. So I don't know where the term comes from, but when I go to Trinidad, I'll ask some older people there.
Once again, we'll show Dr. Brooks.